Okay, welcome everyone to ALIA Graphics. I want to say third webinar. We've been doing these annually to really promote the comics to libraries and all this, and answer some burning questions. And this time the theme is "Let's get practical," answering your questions. So we're really putting that to the test. We had some we asked for questions. We got quite a few. So the way that we're going to structure this webinar is all of the questions that we've received beforehand. We've divided amongst us. We're all going to talk to different aspects of it. Hopefully, we're going to answer them as you needed, and then we're going to, at the end of that, we've got time put aside for questions that you have today. So if you didn't get a chance to submit your questions, or if you've thought of something in the meantime, or if something comes up while we're talking, there'll be a bit of time at the end to for us to answer those. So before we go any further, do we want next slide, please, Gabby? So I would like to acknowledge, or as a group, we would like to following acknowledgement. As a national group based across the land that we call Australia, we would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. We pay respect to the elders, past and present, of all First Nations people across the land and thank them for their rich storytelling traditions. And next slide, please. Thank you, Gabby. So we're for those of you who don't know how ALIA groups work, special interest groups are national. They're supported by ALIA, but they're run by a team of volunteers. All of the committee are volunteers. We aim to support library staff interested in all aspects of collection development, advocacy, and program related to graphic novels and comics across Australia. As you can see, we're currently the committee itself is a bit East Coast heavy. But we're always looking for new members. If you're from one of those areas that doesn't have an arrow pointing to it, or even if you are, do please get in touch after the webinar, and we'd be very happy to have you to talk to you about how to get involved and what to do about that. So I'm James. I'm, as I just said, I'm from the Melbourne Athenaeum Library in Melbourne. Do you want to quickly go through the other committee members, introduce yourselves while we've got this up?
Sure. I'm Georgi. I'm from Kingston Libraries in Victoria. And Marissa, you're next.
Oh, I am I? I'm Marissa, and I'm also in the Melbourne area.
Yep. And
Jade?
Yeah, so I'm Jade. It's really nice to be here with you all, and I'm from University of Sydney Libraries.
Gabby, you're next to my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby. I'm from Blacktown City Libraries in New South Wales.
And Rebecca.
And me. Hello, I'm Rebecca. I am from Redlands in Queensland. I'm from Redland Libraries.
Oh. So that's us. And without any further ado, let's get into it. Let's get on to question time. But the fun one, not the boring Parliament one. So I think our first questions that we got were related to manga, and I think Gabby was going to get us started with these.
No.
Yes, or
No, Georgi was going to start a little. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to get started with this one. So yeah, we received quite a few questions about manga, and I think there's a good reason for it. Manga at the moment rules the world. It's interesting also that in manga, actually, more so than in comics and graphic novels in general, there's actually quite a similar readership of male and female. Still more male readers, but it's definitely more even. And it's actually growing. So female readership is also growing, and female readership of manga is quite significant, and it's actually higher than in general with comics and graphic novels. In Australia, manga sales were up 86% in 2021. That's the last data that I could find. And not only that, but also the top 10 graphic novels in Australia were all manga, according to Books and Publishing as well in 2022. And of course, manga sales are huge in the US, and a very huge percentage of the market. And this is not only happening in Australia and the US, it's actually happening all over the world. So manga sales all over the world, in the US, in Canada, in European countries, in Australia, is up. So there is a reason why. Probably you may have noticed maybe more requests for manga and things like that. So that's why we're talking about it. Next slide.
Yeah, so the first question that we're going to cover today is about arranging your manga section. So as a group, I think we've probably stated before, we love for like the graphic novel collection to have their own space within their sort of age group. So within the children's section, having your fiction section, and then having a dedicated space for the children graphic novels, also with the young adult collection, and then all the way up to adults. But because of the sort of the art style and the format, we think that manga should be obviously with this collection, but have its own space. Either, you know, sort of have your manga and then sort of your Western graphic novels, or, you know, the other way around, however you would like to organize your collection. And it is very sort of branch specific. I know in my library service, we actually have them all interfiled across the different branches. It's a floating collection, our manga collection. And I'll just go to the next slide. Because you can see, so our graphic novels do have their own section, but the manga are interfiled with the Western, and it just makes it a bit cluttered. Due to the, you know, the format, the readers that are reading manga, you know, they go there. They can sort of see the volumes that you have. They can experience other series. But yeah, when it's sort of interfiled, it does get a bit cluttered. Or I believe it was Northern Beaches Library that I heard them speak about their manga collection. They actually centralized their collection across 2 branches. So they pulled in all of their manga from across the branches. It gave them an opportunity to look at the specific series, see what volumes they had, what volumes were missing. They could weed and sort of arrange their manga across 2 of their branches, and then it, you know, has helped with yes, it has helped with readers finding specific volumes. And they've just let me know in the chat that they're going to be opening up to all branches as it has become so popular again. But yeah, a great way to arrange your manga collection. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So the next question has to do with weeding, and Rebecca, you said you could handle this one?
Yes. So just to kind of say what the question was, that when it comes to weeding manga, it is hard to know what to weed because I have limited shelf space and I don't want to break up series. What are your suggestions? So this is something I deal with a lot in my library service. So I think the very first point to make is to really learn yourself, and then also communicate to staff that manga does not run like most other collections. It's quite special. There are plenty of volumes, and the way that we kind of describe it here, which I find is quite interesting to teach people how that works, is to think of it as a TV series. So if you miss 3 episodes in the middle of a a long TV series, you're not going to keep watching it. You're not going to be invested because you've missed in vital stuff. And that's how manga works. So if you are finding your manga collection is missing parts, that is it's not going to get checked out. So there's a few things to do around that. The first is to just replace the missing titles if possible, not worrying about that it's an older, a 2010 One Piece or anything like that. If you can get it, it's worth it because it's going to make the rest of those volumes in that series work for you. The only thing is sometimes you do have to look outside of traditional library suppliers. So you might have to go to maybe a local manga store if you're able to do this. Booktopia has some, and I've noticed recently we've even sourced some from Big W. They're starting to do big box sets, which have been really good to just grab and fill in a bunch of gaps in our collection. So that's been quite good. Also, looking out to fill these gaps is popular titles will often get reprinted. So keep an eye on that, especially if you can see an anime is coming out based on that or has, they'll usually reprint it. And if they don't reprint just the volume, they may reprint it in an omnibus, so 3 of the volumes in the one title. So that can actually be a really good space saver on your shelves as well, because I know shelf space is such a premium, and mangas can take up a lot of space in that you need those long runs of manga. So it's worth kind of looking at that. The last thing is if you do find that you can't fill gaps or you've tried and that series is just not performing for you, it's probably worth reading that entire series rather than just ad hoc taking items through or letting them circulate or not circulate. But a few things to consider when reading part of that collection is donations to schools, because schools absolutely cry out for manga because it is so popular at the moment. But also maybe even creating a reciprocal agreement with a nearby library, and if your collection that you're reading can help fill their gaps, and vice versa, that can be a really beneficial thing to look into. So that's just a brief touch on reading manga. There's a lot out there, but I've just put 2 resources there, which we link to, I believe, on our website. Is Manga and Libraries is a fantastic website, and they have a bunch of webinars recorded and things like that. And then the Manga Librarian is a fantastic website, and she actually has a few blogs specifically around reading manga that I myself have found really useful. But I believe that's me.
So we received a question about some of our favorite manga turned anime kind of thing. So these are some of our favorites. We were only meant to choose one, but Marisa has a special right to choose 3 because she reads so much manga, and Rebecca has 2 as well. But yeah, so these are some of our favorites that have been turned from manga to anime.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, or vice versa. I put Vinland Saga, but I could have easily said many others. Spy X Family rules as well at the moment. All right.
That one is very popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have there is a combination there too of short and longer series as well. So there is something there for pretty much every niche in your collection. So yeah.
Yep. And we've got different genres within this as well.
Yeah.
We've got sports, we've got action adventure, we've got fantasy, we've got slice of life. It's doing all the things.
Good work.
So the next question that we got was related to narratology and how to apply that to comics and graphic novels. Now, this is a complex thing. Narratology is the study of narrative and narrative structure, and I could get very boring into the difference in a story about narrative and discourse, but I'm sure that that's not what you're all interested in. So I'll keep this at a surface level. And I'll say that traditionally narratology has been focused on novels and texts like that. So very much text, not text and image, and even trying to look into how narrative works in film and stuff like that is something that is somewhat underrepresented. And in comics, this is particularly bad. Often comics are used as examples of in these things because we have a because it's still in a printed form, so it's reproducible. But they then tend not to talk about how the structure of comics informs the way that narrative is perceived and understood, and what that does to and how that impacts the story and the item as a whole. And comics narratology is very much looking at that specifically. So yeah, next slide, Gabby. So on this slide, this is just a quick 3-panel comic strip that shows some of the elements that are very specific to comics. So things like the panels and the layout and placement of things, how the point of view is. So in a textbook, that's only text. There's not quite so much of a focus on that. Every panel with a comic, you have to decide, or the creator has to decide, where the reader is viewing that panel from. There's speech bubbles, and in this case, there are words outside of speech bubbles. And what does that mean when the words aren't there? How movement works. You can see there's movements from the lines, the stance. All of this suggests movement and dynamic poses and all of this. And then the passage of time. So the 3 panels are taking the temporal and making it spatial. So as time passes from past to future, we're viewing from left to right. So all of these are elements of the structure of comics, and they play a part in how narratology is in how the narrative is understood. So as far as what libraries can do, this is a really good example of why it's so important to be familiar with the collection, familiar with how your collection functions, because these are important elements of how comics work. And if you don't understand that, you can't put this sort of stuff into words. When someone comes in looking for a book and they're not quite sure what they're after, but you're trying to get there, these elements are useful, and understanding how the elements are executed are very useful in the in that reader's advisory and helping members. So if this is something that does interest you, on the next slide we have so these are some good resources for comic structure and narratology. First one, Understanding Comics by Scott McLeod. The second one, Unflattening by Nick Sousanis. And the final one, The Narratology of Comic Art, Kai Mikkonen. The first two are in graphic novel format, so they are panels and images and everything. The last one is an academic text. It's all text. It's quite dense. It also goes from left to right, most accessible to least accessible, in my opinion. So that's a way of doing. There is also it's a website, so it doesn't have a nice cover to put on the slide, but there is also Ramina Yee, who is an Australian comic creator, is still putting together, I think, or has completed now.
She's
Jurgi will
launched
probably
it
be able to.
now.
She's launched it, yes.
Yeah.
Kind of a response almost to understanding comics and her take on what goes into it. And we'll Jurgi can put the link in the chat, because it's I had it open and
Yeah.
when the stuff decided to reset, it's not working.
We'll
But
share the link.
We'll share the link. Yep.
We'll share the link, definitely. And I think this is a growing field and a really important one. We need to understand how stories are told with comics, which is different because they are multimodal texts. And so it's definitely a growing field, and Reimenergy's contribution is enormous. And it's amazing that she's made these available on a website. It's available freely for everyone all around the world. So if you're a teacher, for example, and you're teaching English and you're looking at different texts and you're looking at comics as multimodal text, perfect resource to use. If you're a media studies teacher, perfect resource to use as well, because it really breaks down the different devices that are unique to comics as well. So, because film has its own unique devices in storytelling. So does prose, so does poetry, and so do comics as well. So yeah, really amazing resource, and I'm sure someone will put the link, or otherwise I'll put it later. But yeah, let's keep going.
Yep. So the next question we have has to do with representation of disabilities and neurodiversity. Gabby, you had some comments on this one?
Yes, when we were looking at the questions for this webinar, we all sort of came across this one, and there was so many to pick from. But for the purpose of this webinar, we've just sort of highlighted three that do showcase disabilities, neurodiversities in graphic novels that aren't specifically like an illness, one about illness or a superhero narrative. So the first one is My Aunt is a Monster by Renan Yi. So Safia, this is a children's graphic novel. Safia, she is blind, and she sort of accessed the world via audiobooks. And when tragedy happens to her parents, she goes to live with her reclusive auntie, Lady Whimsy, who you can see is a bit monstrous looking. So she wants to go on a great adventure. Lady Whimsy is one of the greatest adventurers of all time. And yes, so it highlights, well, not highlights, it showcases sort of the Safia, but her disability doesn't slow her down, and she will become the next great adventurer, world adventurer. So really fun one for a junior graphic novel. Stars in Their Eyes by Jess Walton and Ashka. A young adult graphic novel about two people that meet at FanCon, and it sort of details, their day. Maisie is trying to meet her favorite hero, and then she meets Ollie, and it's sort of like their day panned out, and it's it's just such a lovely graphic novel. And I believe it's just been reprinted in America, and this is the American cover. So our Australian version is black and white, and then this one is being reprinted in full color. So very, very fun. And then the third one we wanted to highlight is a quick and easy guide to sex and disability. So it's a non-fiction graphic novel written by A. Andrews, who is a disabled cartoonist, and it's goes through the basics of disability, sexuality in such a lovely light and really positive way. So these are just three. There are a lot more, so keep an eye on our blog, and we are going to create a whole list, and we'll pop it up there. So yeah,
awesome. And then moving on, Oh dear, it's a gray
Yes.
area of the book
All right.
challenges.
So-
ERG, help.
Well, moving on. This is one of the hot topics of the last few years, especially in the US, and unfortunately, it has landed in Australia as well this year. So we had a few challenges this year, and quite a few things happened. I'm just gonna, James and Rebecca will talk about it more, but I wanted to give a bit of a context and, at least to start talking about this. There is some gray area. So there is some gray area in terms of what is age appropriate. Because what is age appropriate for one person and another person is different, and it can be quite different, okay? What is young adult? I think that's something that we actually need to talk about as a sector as well, because what is young adult for publishers and what is young adult for libraries is different. So it's something that we need to talk about. And this is not just related to comics, it's related to everything in general. And because of that, of course, we need to talk about soft censorship as well. So soft censorship is, I would describe it as something that, someone in the library decides, oh, maybe let's just take this title off, just to avoid any confrontation or any controversy. And sometimes it's done, with good intentions, but it's something that we need to be critical of and really think about whether we should actually remove that title or not, because it's not our job to censor. And I think James will talk more about that. So, but the things that we know for sure are that freedom to read is one of the core principles of libraries. And ALIA and APLA released a freedom to read statement this year. I invite you to read it, and they have some resources there as well. And it's in the ALIA website. And there is also a freedom to read committee. It's one of our core principles, and we need to defend it, and we need to be aware of it. We need to also make sure that people understand that we are information professionals. We're not, silly people in a cardigan who make decisions willy-nilly, just to put it in a very kind of goofy way. But yeah, we are information professionals, and we base our decisions on documents and policies and guidelines. And of course, we also need to talk about the Australian Classification Board as well, which obviously, if they make a decision, so books and graphic novels are books, so publications in general are not classified, but if they are classified by the Classification Board, then that's binding, and we need to follow, because that's the law, okay? So just to give you a little bit of an intro to that kind of thing, and some food for thought. Yeah, I think now James will take it, or is it Rebecca first? One of them. Oh no, it's me. It's just on me. Sorry. This is a perfect example. So these are actually 3 of the books that were classified actually this year. Okay. In Australia this year, 15 publications were actually classified by the Classification Board so far. 2 of them are manuals on explosives. We wouldn't have them at the library, so that's all right. One of them is an anti-Semitic conspiracy-filled book, also not something that libraries would have, so that's okay. The other 12 things that have been classified this year are graphic novels. So graphic novels are vulnerable. We need to be aware of that, and we need to be aware of what gets classified as well. And perfect example. Right there, let's talk about it, is a book that I've heard that some libraries have actually put in the adult collection just to avoid any controversies. But that book is actually for teens, for teenagers, so it should be in the young adult or teen collection. And in fact, then when it was classified by the Classification Board, it was classified as unrestricted, which means that anyone can read it. It may not be your thing, and that's fine, just put it back on the shelf. It's not for you, but it may be for someone else. And that's the perfect example of something that, could have soft censorship, And The Boys is one that I should definitely flag as well. The Boys was classified as category 1. Unfortunately, that means that it's a graphic novel for adults. And so, like rated R in films. And that means, unfortunately, in Australia, that in most states, it's quite restricted. It needs to be sealed in a wrapper. And in Queensland, it's actually banned, which I believe, I think it's quite unfortunate that a book for adults in Australia is so severely restricted in most states, and in Queensland is banned. And I think it's something that we should be critical of as well. It's not a book for me. I tried to read it. I read the first volume, didn't like it, didn't read anymore, but I will definitely defend that adults should be able to read it if they want. Next slide.
Okay. Following on from that, we just wanted to touch on, going into this first question, the importance of having a good and strong collection development plan. I was talking to a few people in my library recently, and we're saying if there's anything good that's come out of all of these recent issues in terms of people trying to censor and ban books, it's that a lot of libraries have taken this opportunity to review their collection development plan, or some of them even create a collection development plan. So it's very important to back yourself, back your decisions with good policy. So make sure that you review that plan and work within it. We recommend explicitly including graphic novels in your collection development plans and policies for multiple reasons. Some of them we've discussed earlier, that these are multimodal texts. They're great for reluctant readers, but also just because they're popular titles. So we serve a community, the community wants to read these books, we should have those books for those people. And if it means putting in our collection development plan graphic novels, manga, this is why we collect them, then let's just do that, just to cut any issues around that. Also, if your collection development plan lists review sources for finding information on books, sometimes, again, you have to go a little bit out of field, because some of the more traditional review sources don't review graphic novels. There are some that are getting there, but we've just listed, not at all a comprehensive list here, but a good starting point of some review sources for you to add. Of course, we're first there, but there's lots of other good ones as well. So it's always worth checking these out. And then if you're wanting to put that specifically into your plan, it's a good idea. But if we go into the next slide, I'll speak specifically on the question that I got. So I'll let you read that while I read out the question that we got. We are currently in an age of frequent book challenges, especially those books that include LGBTQIA+ characters. In response to this, some libraries have chosen to move all items that include any controversial matter out of YA collection to avoid issues, but others have not. What are possible outcomes from both mindsets? So this quote is from someone that was dealing with this in an American library. But if we go to the next slide, I've just done a really quick little breakdown of some of the possible outcomes. I put controversial matter. I mean, that is how long is a piece of string. So moving the titles, some of the things that could happen if we move titles from YA up into an adult section, those titles are not reaching their intended audience. As libraries, again, we want to put items in people's hands. These people are trying to find these items, they're wanting to consume them and read them, and if we're not getting them to people, we've kind of failed in that aspect. It's part of our readers advisory, it's part of our core business. So it'd be quite sad if people come in looking for items and they're not able to find them. Also, on the flip side of that, what could happen is we're actually exposing patrons to levels that they're not ready for. So we're doing the opposite of what we've tried to do if we're moving the title. So a teen may look up on the catalogue, talk to someone, find those titles that have now been shelved in the adult section, but they've been shelved next to actual adult titles that they might not be prepared for or ready for at that level at. So that's also something to consider. There's a reason that we file specific things in specific areas, and that's one of them. So this is a much bigger topic behind that, but I also wanted to point out that most of us work, or some of us work in councils, that run these libraries, and councils are very risk adverse, and sometimes it's an ultimatum of move the title or get rid of it because you're dealing with the politics of working within a council. So I've been given this ultimatum, and a lot of other people have with certain things. So if it's between moving a title up to adult or getting rid of it, it's always worth moving it because you still have it in the collection, it's still accessible. Obviously, it's not ideal, but then you can kind of fight that battle another day if you're wanting to keep it in the adult section. A few tips if this is happening to you or some of the libraries around you. Just harping on that again, a strong collection development plan is important. Back yourself, you can talk to the collection librarian or the staff about why that should be in that section. And in that, making your target age ranges clear for staff and patrons. So like you said before, and libraries, we often work within, I know my library service is 12 to 17 is our YA. So letting staff know that so that they can correctly help with readers advisory. Also, if possible, maybe some signage for the public so that they understand that when they're browsing that section, that this is intended for that age range. And if this is happening in your library service, or again, somewhere, and you're not happy with what's happening and you're comfortable, you can always challenge that's happening. These decisions shouldn't be made within silos, like it should be a conversation. And then also you can always reach out for help, as this is kind of a thing that's been happening lately. So there's ALIA, there's us at ALIA Graphic that will always happy to help, and then the Freedom to Read group. That's over to James to continue.
Yes, as I remembered to unmute. So one of the other questions we got was in regards to this censorship and classification of everything, what does the library have responsibility for? And it's really important to understand this, and it's, for the most part, it is pretty clear. The library is not responsible for censorship. The library has never been responsible for censorship, and in my opinion, should never be responsible for censorship. That is the role of the Australian Classification Board. They are the ones that make the decisions about whether the book is appropriate for society, whatever. All that the library is doing is making those books available, not just books, like all the items that the Classification Board looks at. The library's job is to make it available. If the Classification Board says this is not something that should be made available, then the library doesn't make it available. And that's so the library doesn't have responsibility for making those decisions. The library also doesn't have any requirement or responsibility to act on challenges. The library may choose to change where an item is kept or remove it from the collection, and there are a wide range of reasons why this might happen. But unless the Australian Classification Board has made a ruling that affects where the library is keeping it, there is no requirement, whether or not there's a challenge, whether or not people are saying it shouldn't be here, all this, there is no requirement for the library to act on those. And again, how the library deals with those challenges, that comes down to having your collection development policy and how that's the. What the library does have a responsibility for is to maintain that awareness of the classification status of items. And I think, as Jurgi's just put in the chat, ALIA is working on ways to improve the communication of classification decisions to libraries so that it's easier for libraries to do this. But in the meantime, they are listed on the Classification Board's website. So if there is something that that someone comes to you about and you're not sure, if you go to the Australian Classification Board website, you can look up if they have reviewed it. And it will say if it's not there, they probably haven't. But otherwise it will say it's under review or it has been reviewed and here is the or assessed, I think, because it's assessed, and then if that's appealed, then it's reviewed. But so if it is undergoing assessment, or if it has been assessed and what the outcome was, will be listed. So that's a really useful way of doing it, and that is the library, within a reasonable period of these decisions being made, should be acting on those decisions. So next slide. The other part that people tend to ask about that people often wonder about is what the library's responsibility is for that access in the space. So if the book has been shelved in the adult collection because it's restricted, the library does have the responsibility to ensure that how they manage their memberships for minors restricts borrowing as appropriate. So if you have self-service, then if a minor or someone who is on a membership that shouldn't be able to borrow these restricted items, if they put that into the self-service machine, it shouldn't issue it to them. If you are if it's a human scanning the items through, then it should flag on the system, and the librarian, library technician, whoever it is, can say, you can't borrow this, it's restricted, all of this. As far as access in the library, once again, and we're going back to policies, but not the collection development policy this time at least. So the policy about behaviour in the library and minors accessing the library, if the policy says that there is a requirement for people under a certain, for library users under a certain age to be supervised, then that minimizes any responsibility the library has for the child accessing restricted materials that are in a collection that is not targeted to them. So if you have a kid going to an adult collection and getting the book, and that's getting the boys, for example, and reading it in the space, if the library's policy is that minor should have been supervised, then then the library's responsibility for that is minimized, because a parent or guardian should have been supervising them and ensuring that didn't happen. That said, the library does have the responsibility to make sure that those restricted items are not in junior areas. So if you put the boys in your junior graphic novels, then it doesn't matter if you've got a supervision thing or not. That's going to be a problem for you because it's a restricted title that you have specifically put with in a different collection. So, but hopefully that's pretty straightforward. And if you do have more questions, because this is a very important thing for libraries to get right, you're welcome to again contact the contact ALIA Graphic, contact the Freedom for Read Committee, and just ALIA generally. And I think there's one more thing that's just worth saying, because it is something that gets talked about a bit, or was a bit earlier in the year, was the relationship of the images in there. And it's important to remember that comics and graphic novels, there are no additional restrictions for censorship or classification for these over books that only contain text. Should not be treated any differently simply because they contain images. We don't do that with science textbooks. We don't do that with memoirs that have plates of illustrations in there, or plates of historical photos, anything like that. The only time that we seem to do that is with comics, and we shouldn't, because there's no legitimate reason for that through the restrictions or requirements of classification. So yeah.
Thanks, James.
I think next we've got Jade.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James. So we had this really great question from a creator that I'm actually a big fan of. So thank you. That's very exciting. So the question is, I've been chatting with some Aussie creators who used to do mailing lists to libraries telling them of new releases that librarians really liked. However, recent changes to the library system saw a lot of these librarians no longer at the same jobs. What gives? So I can only speak from my experience with this one, but I could really resonate with this question, being at my 5th library now. So as we can see on the slide there, libraries, like all industries, really have faced lasting changes as a result of COVID. So there's been ripple effects and also retirements, which have caused really big sort of staffing change across the industry. So a lot of positions were not filled again, or even still we're waiting on being filled at the moment. In addition to this, and kind of related, is there's been a real opening up of libraries to transferable skills from across industries. So it's a really dynamic change at time for libraries at the moment, which is really exciting. But it also means that there's a lot of time for librarians out there at the moment, unfortunately. So what we suggest is, if you just go to the next slide, is if you're not getting a response from a particular contact, or if you've been let know that someone is no longer at that library, we do recommend just keep contacting the library's generic contact details, hopefully until you get onto a person. If not though, we are so happy to assist creators who are having difficulty making contact with libraries, and also contacting libraries who want to make contact with local creators, so you can get in touch with us there. It's not us being difficult, we're doing our best, but yeah, it's always really great to hear from creators, and hopefully we can connect you to where you want to go.
Okay, that's my turn. So we were also asked about e-platforms for comics. There are 4 main platforms that are most widely used and commonly used in Australia. BorrowBox they started fairly recently with comics. They used to have comics before, but they weren't very well implemented on their app to read. It was kind of painful, to be honest. Whereas now they're a little bit better. So, but it's still fairly new. Libby, Overdrive have been doing it for a long time, and so have Hoopla and Comics Plus. Comics Plus is also, it has been kind of renewed and rebranded, because there used to be a Comics Plus app many years ago, and then that was sold to a different company, and then they redeveloped the app, and it's with a different company now, which I think it's Biblioteca that owns it. But anyway, it depends on your library and your budget, which one you want to use. Look at your budget, look at their business models as well, because they are different. So for example, with Comics Plus and Hoopla, you pretty much get the whole catalog, their whole catalog. So they have more than 20,000 comics each. And they have simultaneous loans as well, simultaneous unlimited loans. How they charge you, though, it's a little bit different, both of them. So it depends on your budget. Libby it has a kind of hybrid model, because there is a package that you can buy that has, about 5,000, I think it is, maybe a little bit more, titles, and you buy that as a package. And again, you have simultaneous loans. But then you can also buy individual licenses for different titles, like we do with ebooks. So it depends on your budget. And I would also say test them, try them, because some, in my opinion, some work better than others. I'm not here to endorse a particular app, though, so I don't want to endorse a particular one. I will say, though, interestingly, I will say one thing, though, that Comics Plus reached out to us just recently, and suggested at least they were after a list of suggested Australian titles that they could add to the app, and they seem keen to have more Australian comics in the app now that they're expanding here in Australia. So, which I thought was cool. I thought it was very cool. And so hopefully we'll see more of that. And I think e-platforms and e-comics are definitely growing. And I can tell you another thing, because I just read about it recently. Manga sales in Japan, in the last 5 years, they've been breaking records. They've been selling more than ever, right? But sales of print manga have actually been declining and falling for the last 3 years. But sales of digital manga have been growing, and are growing quite rapidly as well. So there's something really interesting in Japan going on where manga is really going digital in a very big way. We're not seeing that still with Western comics, but it's a trend that is there in Japan and something to be aware of, and we'll see what happens in the future. Definitely interesting times. And of course, someone just mentioned webtoons. Webtoons, tapas, all those kind of webtoon style webcomic platforms are doing really, really well. And of course, now we're seeing a lot of those also being available in print. So yeah, big. That's it from me. Next one. I think now
so before we
yeah.
go, do you want to jump another slide, please, Gabby? Because we have run a bit long, so want to get this done. And say, as we've said right through, if you have questions, if you have anything that you want to talk to us about, or if you're interested in getting involved, please do get in touch. And I'm aware that we have run a bit long, and we'll have time for some questions, but it will probably go over the hour at this point. So if after this, if you feel you have to head off, that's fine. We'll probably go a bit longer, but now we've got the how to get in touch with us done. So I don't feel bad about that. So now we'll get into some questions, and I want to start with one that I have to say I'm terribly sorry. Apparently we did miss a question in the thing. So it was about manga. And are there any recommendations for manga that is suitable for under 12s? It seems like every manga I pick up either includes graphic violence or sex/romance. And it's from Michael. So sorry that we missed that, Michael. And anyone on the committee got
Sure, I'll tell you one of my favorites. Cat manga is huge. Love cat manga, and there's nothing cuter than cat manga. And my favorite cat manga is Sue and Tai-chan. But the same creator actually has all the series as well. I just wrote it there, Sue and Tai-chan. Beautiful. Cats being cats, and it's gorgeous. It's incredibly cute, totally innocent, completely all ages. But you have all the series as well. Yokai Watch is another one. Yotsuba is another one, and I'm sure that
Pokemon.
Marisa, can you think of others?
Chi Sweet Adventure. Chi Sweet Adventure does really well at my library. And
yes.
Speaking of cats.
Yep.
Five Worlds is a great one.
Yeah, it can be difficult to find them because most of the promotion and so forth we get here is for the ones that are young adult and adult. I do not know for certain because when I was in Japan, I was mostly focused on the ones targeted at teens since I was a high school teacher. But there's a few like Sweetness and Lightning, I think is a pretty solid all ages read.
So I think hopefully that's some good ones to get you started there, Michael. And we might do the same with this as we were going to do with the disability in comics. We might put a list of this on our blog afterwards, just to keep things moving so we have time for others. But hopefully that's enough to get you started. We did have another question that's already come through. Does ALIA have a list of Australian graphic novels? I want to put a display together for Aussie Comic Book Day. And we do have yearly lists of Australian titles, I think, on our blog. Unless
I'll share that.
Yep. Well, yeah. So that we'll have the link for that. We'll also I've noticed as we've been going, we've had lots of useful links sitting in the comments as we've been going. People sharing resources, which is fantastic. We'll collate them and we'll try and make sure that we include those when we put this recording out, so that we have so that they're available like in the description on YouTube or however it ends up happening. And we'll just try and make sure we've got those there. So as I said at the start, before we started recording, if you don't want to have your voice on chat. But you have a question, feel free to put it on the thing. But if there are any other questions, you're welcome to do it through the chat or turn on your mic and ask them. So are there any questions at this point?
Don't be shy.
Either generally or about stuff that we've covered already. However, is there anything like fantastic fiction for graphic novels? If there is, please tell me. I'm not aware of anything. It would be really nice if I believe there are some things that are more specialized, but they're usually not as well laid out and easy to use as fantastic fiction. So yeah, unfortunately, not really.
I have to say, this is one thing that Comixology was actually pretty good, a pretty good website for this kind of thing. And I very often used to consult that website, the Comixology website. But obviously then Amazon bought Comixology and you know, they folded Comixology into Amazon, and it's been a disaster. And I haven't found any websites like that.
It's difficult to find one that is for everything, but you can at least check with some of the big publishers that will have their own new release schedule.
Yeah,
Me being the manga nut, I'm thinking Viz and Yen Press, and I know there's others that I'm not remembering right now, but those specific websites will have the new release schedule, and you'll be able to look through their catalog which will in theory be split up by genres.
And that's even not just manga too. The other ones are, you know, everything from DC and Marvel have new release stuff on their website through to Drawn and Quarterly and Fantagraphics, stuff like that. They all have these are our new releases on their website. Even and for Australia, Gestalt Comics and some of the micro publishers around the country. They list what new releases are. Publishers like to do that. It is a lot of legwork to follow them all, but that's probably the best there is at this point.
There's also our blog.
Yeah, I was going to say our blog as well.
Yes, we list a lot of new releases every month. And I was just going to quickly mention too, if you're on Edelweiss at all, that's working much more in the future, but that's quite good to kind of see what's coming up in the next year and little previews before publication. Yeah. I find a few good lists, and like publishers will do here's our spring catalog, and they'll put it on an Edelweiss, so that can sometimes be quite helpful.
Yeah.
So we had another question. I'm really interested in graphic nonfiction for teaching purposes in my TAFE library. Any lists or collations? Again, not that I'm really aware of. I believe the ALA is doing really good work on this. So that's the American Library Association. Their graphic novels and comics roundtable is doing good work on this for particular subjects. I think they've got a decent one about graphic medicine and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not aware of anything that's collating it effectively across all of nonfiction.
We often include nonfiction titles, and I'm very particularly interested in nonfiction graphic novel because it's actually most of the graphic novels that I read are nonfiction probably. So we do often include them in our list as well, in our monthly roundup of new titles. But no, we don't have a list as such.
Yeah,
maybe something to do, but yeah, we'll think about it. Maybe something to do. But it's the end of the year and things are piling up. But yeah.
I'm just saying. So a few comments.
There was also a question from Sally, who worked in a K-2 school library and wanted to expand the graphic novel collection and would be interested in any book lists for graphic novels for younger readers. It's really exciting because there are sort of more graphic novels coming out for that, younger reading group. One that comes to mind is there's Hello Twigs. That is, there's another cute one about ghosts called Fitz and Cleo. So there is more coming out for this age group. Again, I feel like it's another list that we have to make.
But having said all that, like there are a lot of resources out there as well, and you obviously have a look at our website and the kind of things that we put on our blog, and the lists that the titles that we list there every month, and then of course our notables for Australian titles as well. So the notable Australian graphic novels. So we've been doing it now for 3 years, and so those lists are there, and then of course another great resource as well, if you're getting started with a graphic novel collection, for example, is No Flying, No Tides. Is an excellent resource, by the way, an excellent website that's been going since 2002, and they have some core collection lists as well. I just put the link in the chat, and they have some core collection lists.
Regular listing you can filter by genre and age range and such too.
Yeah, so there are a lot of resources out there, and again, as I said before, get involved with the group, because we kind of share these ideas and resources, and we have these kind of conversations all the time. And that way you can contribute to it, and we can do more things as well, and cover a lot more ground. But also, if you can't get involved with the group because time, hey, where does it go? But, if you can't get involved with the group, but you have a burning question kind of thing, email us as well. We're always, we often get questions, and then we talk in the group, and then we answer them. So.
And I want to just, given all the fantastic stuff we've had in the all the resources listed, if you come across something that would be a fantastic resource, please get in touch with us for that as well. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to be able to push, get it out further. If you come across something that you're finding useful, chances are others will as well. So not just with questions, but if we're always happy to hear about stuff that we can resources that we can boost to other libraries.
Absolutely. The purpose of this group is to create resources for everyone, and to
promote the resources
freely available to everyone, as much as we can. So comics librarianship is a growing field, and it's one that the market's growing as well, and one that we hope that we can contribute to, and that the more people that we can have in the group, the better as well, because that will allow us to cover more ground and from different angles as well.
Yeah. Well, if there are any other questions, put them in the chat now while I say thank you to the rest of the committee. Big thank you to Gabby for running the slides that we've been using. Big thank you to Jade for managing the responses in the chat. Big thank you to everyone else just being involved, the research that went into answering the questions, managing all of that, and thank you to all the folks who came and listened and participated during the session, and thank you to everyone who's listening to the recording afterwards. We do try and make sure that we get recordings up, because we know that library schedules can be difficult to work around. So the time was never going to be great for everyone, but hopefully we're by putting it up as a recording, we're making it accessible as possible. So yeah, thank you everyone for the time, and look forward to hearing from you or seeing you at our future events.